All right. So lately I've been doing a deep dive into influencer and affiliate marketing for work, and I can't help but reflect on how the social media space has just adapted over recent years and how it's played such a vital role on things like pop culture and how we shop and even our aspirations and goals. So today I'm discussing the evolution really of social media and its impact on celebrity culture, consumer behavior, and brand marketing, or at least my take on it. So in the early 2000s, as social media was on the rise, we typically only followed friends or acquaintances that we knew on Instagram and Facebook. But it was during this time in the digital age where we began to consume content like reality TV, for example. And as our ideology of fame began to shift and social media grew, we started letting more and more people into our circles. For example, people who achieved like this small level of fame, but for the most part didn't really achieve this status for anything specific or any specific talent. It was mainly just their personalities. This isn't a shot at them, but as an example, like look at the Kardashians. Did any of those sisters really have any talent that set them apart from like the average everyday person? No, they were just beautiful and rich, and they knew how to attract and retain our attention. Kris Jenner is probably the most talented out of all of them. Or I guess maybe like Kendall Jenner because she's a model, but she was already famous by the time she was interested in modeling. But that's beside the point. So as these reality TV stars began to achieve this level of fame, platforms like YouTube and Vine started catering to people who began creating their own content. And we began following individuals like David Dobrik and Emma Chamberlain and Casey Neistat and PewDiePie, Mr. Beast, and just so many other people, right? But all of these people are just like, at the time, they were just normal, everyday people. And they found a way to break through the noise and hold our attention. And I'd argue these people are 10 times more talented than like reality TV stars because when they started, they didn't have fame or money, and they weren't like the most beautiful people in the room. They were just these online personalities that took advantage of the changing digital age, let's call it. And as we were exposed to them, we tended to relate to them more or feel just more attached to them in some way because they were just everyday people sharing parts of their lives in an interesting and engaging way. Their drive wasn't necessarily for fame like these reality TV stars. Their drive was to create content and share experiences on whatever they were passionate about. And as these personalities began to build larger and larger followings and our attention span got shorter and shorter and more like, I guess more and more influencers achieved this celebrity status in the media landscape. And if you take a look at the past few years, the rise of TikTok and short form video, the influencer world has just exploded. Like you've got household names like Charli D'Amelio, Addison Rae, Zach King, Jeffree Star, Kabi Lame, who all like together they have millions and millions of followers across the world. And as Gen Z and Gen Alpha even get older, you start to realize how these kids are growing up in a world where these are their celebrities, like they don't watch TV. They spend time on social media. And even a recent study showed that over half of Gen Z said they'd be interested in being an influencer if the opportunity presented itself. And this is a new profession, right? And anyone would dream to have this profession right now, I feel like. And it honestly just seems so much more attainable than being like a standout professional athlete or actor or singer, because in all honesty, you don't need as much talent. And if you get big enough, you can make a shit ton of money through sponsorships or brand collabs, or you can even use your own follower base to start your own brand. Like the Demilia Sisters have a couple of brands, I believe. Emma Chamberlain has her coffee brand. Logan Paul has Prime. These are all just normal ass people who started with nothing, and now the three of them alone have a combined estimated net worth of $130 million, which is fucking insane, right? That just a mass amount of money for people who just post content like everyone else in the world. And to be honest, because these people once lived normal lives and we watch them together obtain this level of fame, we trust them more than like the A-list celebrity. You don't watch their progression to fame on such a personal, like behind the scenes way as you do with influencers. And the same goes all the way down, I feel like, for like micro influencers and even that level. We care about what these people say about brands, and in turn it influences our purchasing decisions. And I have a recent example. So historically speaking, typically in the Super Bowl, you'd see commercial campaigns led by huge stars like Jennifer Aniston was in one this year. She's typically always in one. You had like Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis, like these celebrity couples, or even like Britney Spears back in the day had her Pepsi commercial. But in my opinion, this trend is going to begin to shift over the next like 5 years, where influencers are going to hold just the majority of the buying power. I mean, look at CeraVe this year. I just did a massive dive into their Super Bowl campaign and all their analytics. And 3 weeks prior to the Super Bowl, they collaborated with more than 60 influencers of all sizes, including like most notably Haley Khalid and Bobby Altoff. And in total, the campaign generated 6 billion impressions. And to put this into perspective, the world population is 8.1 billion, right? That's insane. And if you just limit this to the US population, it's like 331 million. So respectively, that means if you were to just limit this to the US, everyone in the US was exposed to this campaign on social roughly 18 times then. And brands are beginning to use influencers like a mean of crowdsourcing in a sense. And I think it's really smart. Like, would you rather have one A-list celebrity promoting your brand, or for the same budget, would you rather have a handful of influencers who have an incredibly loyal following and that you watch as a consumer religiously every week, possibly? For example, I'm personally a huge Emma Chamberlain fan. I actually went through my YouTube watch history recently, and I came across her in early 2023, and I straight up just binged her YouTube videos. And then I found out she had a podcast, Anything Goes, and I listened to that podcast probably more consistently than any other content. And it's like, why do I do this, right? Like, she's just a normal girl who burps on camera and talks about her cats and anxiety, and I simply, I can't stop watching. I feel like I know her on a personal level because she's just put out so much content. And I've even gone completely out of my way to buy her coffee, and it's just why did I do that? Because it simply has her name on it. That's the only reason. I valued her opinion, and I was like, I got to try it, because I just love her that much. But this is a good segue into podcasts even. Most podcasts aren't even done by celebrities. They're started by normal people with typically good personalities, right, who talk about interesting subjects or subjects that they're really passionate about. I mean, look at Barstool Sports. They have dozens of podcasts, and the Call Her Daddy podcast started there. And now it's the second biggest podcast in the world. And this girl landed a 3-year deal worth more than $60 million. And is she any different than the average everyday person? No, not really. But an average of 5 million listeners tune into her podcast weekly just because they like her personality. And for me, it's just so bizarre how fast someone can just suddenly acquire this level of fame too. I mean, look at Bobby Altoff, who I mentioned was in the CeraVe Super Bowl campaign, started her podcast in the exact same month that I did. And now that girl has 3.1 million followers on Instagram alone and is getting featured on platforms like E! News and shit like that. And meanwhile, I have 300 Instagram followers, and most of them are from people I knew in high school who I haven't spoken to in 10 years. Now, I'm not complaining. I'm just trying to put things into perspective of how fast something and someone can just gain traction. And there was another recent study that I found on this topic that said of the nearly 104 million Instagram users in the US at the time, 10.2 million of them could be considered influencers. And to clarify, influencers were defined as those who are over the age of 18 with public profiles and who had over 1,000 followers. Granted, you can divide influencers into segmented categories. For example, like a nano influencer is anyone from 1,000 to 10,000 followers. Micro influencers have between 10,000 and 100,000 followers, and then macro influencers have between 100,000 followers and 1 million followers, and then there's mega influencers who's above 1 million followers. But by that definition, that statistic means nearly 10% of all Instagram profiles in the US have the potential to sway the purchasing decisions and behaviors of their audience, and that's up from 2.5% in 2020. So that leads me to like the question, like, why are influencers growing so rapidly, right? Like, well, I also read that Gen Alpha will be the largest generation by 2025, and statistics show that 55% of kids want to buy something from their favorite YouTube or Instagram star that they're using, wearing, or consuming, like I did with Emma's coffee. 49% of kids trust influencers as much as their own family or friends when it comes to product recommendations. And then 50% of Gen Alpha spends more than 3 hours per day on digital devices, which means it's just increasing their exposure to influencer content and marketing. So this may be an unpopular opinion, but over time, celebrities, I think, are going to lose their appeal, and the size of your social media following is going to be the true representation of someone's fame. I mean, one of my closest friends over the last few years has over 2 million followers on TikTok, and he's just like this completely normal, fun-loving dude who likes to make content. He'll probably get like super embarrassed that I'm even like talking about this, but don't worry, I have like 3 people who tune into my podcast weekly right now. But it's crazy to think about, like, this dude is technically a celebrity and I'm talking to him every day. But it's just wild to me that I can noticeably see how society's view of fame has just changed drastically over the last like decade, let's call it. Like Mr. Beast was on the latest cover of Time magazine, and it was titled Mr. Beast, how he became the most watched person in the world. But even at the same time, it's also like so segregated. Like my wife follows med school influencers, and I didn't even know this realm even existed until I noticed her watching the same people like every week, and they're just fucking losing their shit on camera because they're having just mental breakdowns just trying to become a doctor. And why does she watch this? Well, because it's relatable, and over time that's going to hold more value, I think. Anyways, rant over. I just find this topic so incredibly interesting, and I don't think it's necessarily because I'm driven by the idea of fame. I think it's more wild to me how fast someone can just achieve this level of notoriety in today's society, where you can influence someone's decision, and on a mass scale too. Like I can't even convince my wife that I'm right half the time, and she's just one person. But that's all I've got. Go follow your local nano influencer and support them. They're just normal ass people like you trying to make some relatable content. But you never know. I mean, like this time next year, they could be at the fucking People's Choice Awards like all these other influencers. Anyways, I appreciate your time. Thank you for listening. And with that, I will talk to you next week.